Hi, hi YouTube. I don't have an intro, but this will count as one because we're in the spooky season. I've got my friend Carl here, and yeah. So if you don't know r/nosleep, it's just a bunch of really spooky stories. So we're gonna read some, starting with "Don't Let Them In." Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it, and sung her to sleep, sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox. The missing pieces of her kept safe so she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage, and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it home. Who's Annie? My sister Annie mothered me. Oh, now we know. With lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and lukewarm microwave meals. She told me ghost stories, and didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always let me shower first so the water was hot, never complaining when she had to make do with the cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde. Annie was desperate to be blonde too, like Marilyn Monroe, like Mom. I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mom less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. Oh. She moved to New York when I turned 18 and never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learned from a young age we would always be left behind. Didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes in the when the Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call our school up and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness and we'd drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old in the backseat of the car, coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde. Her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter. Radio up and windows down, blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be out all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or two. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and fridge packed full. Post-it note on the front with a smear of Mom's lipstick and the outline of a kiss, telling us she'd be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays, smoke up to the ceiling, Mom lost in the haze. We'd sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the AM, then wake up to strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept the coffee. When Mom drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food, refrigerator, a gaping hole in the wall. She'd chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper up by the stairs like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once I spilled a glass of juice on the couch. She looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet, and then took every single cushion off the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. My mom drank too much, was the worst. She'd laugh too loud and too long at anything and everything until her mouth started to shake and she started crying at the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mom was like this, went somewhere deep inside herself, and there's hair in my mouth. Gosh darn it. Where nobody could hurt her. She'd stay up until the morning, watching the old black and white movies on TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I'd cry when I'd find Mom passed out cold on her bed, sure she would never wake up. Annie would wipe my tears, tell me she was only sleeping, just like the princesses in my storybook. We'd sit on Mom's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mom off the bathroom floor again and again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off her face and the vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she'd pissed herself. Watching them then, there was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. Jesus. It was October and I was 13, Annie 16. It was a Wednesday night and Mom had been gone for 2 days. She called us that morning from a payphone, voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all her new friends. Hoped we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip glosses and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she'd got the money for them. I didn't care. We'd taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she had made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness in the sea, and I savored every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos of her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles. Nokias are a godsend. Like let's not judge those for a second. Wishing over and over that Mom wouldn't come home, that she'd just stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We both laughed. Annie throwing her head back, gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I bent to pick her up, I'd caught her breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face. Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't start picking her up too. Couldn't watch her fall again and again, just like Mom. I knew she'd never get back up. I'd stared down at her, blonde hair falling into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother. And then I was running, feet slamming the hallway with heartbeats turned loose. I'd run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. It smashed between us on the floor, glass shards shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside the open windows, the sky turned pale gold, clouds a mess of pink and cream smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things even when it was too late. Smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach turning traitor inside my ribcage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food, not made in a microwave. She'd set the table, Tammy Wynette singing softly from the CD player, Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite I forgave her. Mom never cooked dinner, or remembered my favorite was spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing the dishes when we were first heard it. A moth was crawling down the side of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen as it was coming from far off. I figured it was Micah, the 2-year-old next door, having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch. Or maybe even Lucky, Strike, the cat that junkies down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when he came around, whining over my ankles, but Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving, they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie flipped the Christmas lights strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs, watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations and the stories of how they came to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realized she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still like to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shapes we could pick out. Ah, yes, that one there is the Coors Light. Got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing up past the power lines, right next to the ashtray left there by the angels on a smoke break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, face tilted up to all those dead stars. Let's wish, Emmy. Let's wish. So we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other confused. Annie shrugged and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost and tired and alone. It must be Mika, I said, slowly getting to my feet. Maybe he walked around the back? Shit, do you want to call Connie and tell her we'll bring him over? Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. Guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft on my heels, against my heels. The air smelled like it might rain, fresh and clean and growing, a promise unfulfilled. Em? Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Em, get inside now. She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze barefoot in the dirt. I'd found what she was looking at. In the bushes by the back fence was a person crouched with their knees tucked up under the chin, arms wrapped around legs. Their mouth hung wide, softly open and closing as he cried, like a child, lost in the dark. Not like a child, but a someone pretending, mimicking the sound, open and closed out in the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright, face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move, animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside and slamming the door behind us, hearing it bounce on its hinges as I locked it. We watched as the person slowly walked towards us, towards the house, steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, held me tight, and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. Don't turn around, Emmy. Don't turn around. Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder, out into the darkness, and he grabbed my face hard and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked. Both of us groaned from the same bones. I'm going to call the cops, and everything's going to be... Her voice faltered, stuttering. Tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promise of rain. Annie never cried. Your phone's on the porch, she whispered, and bile crawled its way up my throat. Her phone was upstairs charging. A soft tap, tap, tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye whites showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass, slowly, over and over. They started to speed up faster and harder, skin meeting glass until they was slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could look now when she screamed, followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough to get into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, two at a time, skipping the ones caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once, and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it to the bathroom. Locking the door, a thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway, trapped between the walls and locked doors. Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter. Shrill bursts of sound and then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. "What the fuck is going on?" I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumb pressing hard enough on the blade to bleed. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrist and a winding red road, still pushing it into my hands despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that Mom's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath, could feel my heartbeat in the base of my throat, a wild, frantic thing. "I'm gonna get the phone from my room." I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. "Yes, I'm going to get the phone, and I'm going to call the cops, and we're going to be okay." I shook my head again. "It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door, and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me." I shook my head, and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. "Yes, promise me, Em." Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. "Promise," she mouthed and unlocked the door as slowly as possible, bolt scraping gently. I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in an eclipse, and then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second, and then I slammed the bolt shut just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles, and then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath. "Em?" came a voice through the door. I started, hands gripping the knife. "Honey, what's going on?" "Mom?" My voice cracked. "Mama, is that you?" I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still. "Sweetie, it's okay. Just open the door. It's okay, just let me in." The handle rattled again, gentler. "Just let me in. It's all okay." She banged on the door and I took my handle of the bolt. "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please." Her voice broke and she started to cry. "Just let me in, baby. I'm so sorry." I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me like when I was a kid and I'd come off the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came through the door, warm and gentle. "Yeah, Emily, let us in. It's all okay." My hand froze on the bolt and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A hand banged on the door, handle rattling. "Emily, let us in." Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mom spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder. "Let us in, let us in, let us in." Over and over again, punctuated by her fist on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. That's not my sister, and you're not my mother. I screamed through the door, hands over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled in a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched to my chest. I didn't know what it was outside that door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled at when I changed the TV channel, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smarter even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked at the outside of the door, and I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long, scraping claw marks, dragged down to the floor. Pillows ripped apart covered the hallway and soft down like it had snowed inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red lights as it washed over her, lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together, broken pieces and all, standing under all those constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon, no wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mom, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together, no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drink I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. Turns out the real monsters are the ones that eat you alive slowly, the kind that come in a bottle or a needle or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you or love you the most, but it's up to you if you let them in. Holy shit. That was a lot. That was also not at all what I was expecting. For something like Don't Let Them In, I was expecting something a lot more supernatural, for it to be just a very traumatizing story. Emergency alert. This is not a test. Immediate threat for residents of redacted counties. Be wary of severe winds, lightning, severe rain, flash floods. Residents are advised to stay indoors. Please lock or bar all entryways into your house. Refrain from using any devices that emit light or loud noise. Please enter a room with no windows. Effective indefinitely. Issued by the National Weather Service. This was the message I was greeted by in the middle of an episode of Big Bang Theory in my living room, frozen halfway through a forkful of Kraft mac and cheese. I sat bolt upright and turned around to look out the window. The sky, as I thought, was crystal clear. A few clouds, but nothing crazy. No rain, no thunder, nothing. Confused, I turned off the TV, erasing the alert from the screen. My 2 dogs came walking over to me, and I patted them on their heads. One of my dogs, the other's brother, was shaking profusely from the buzzing noise that always shows up with Amber Alerts and the like. I left them in the living room and walked through my kitchen on my front porch. My neighbors, too, were standing outside their houses, all looking at the sky in bemusement. An immediate threat? Didn't seem like it, I thought, as my phone started buzzing with the same tone. One by one, everyone else's phones started ringing. I should explain. I guess that I have never experienced a severe weather warning for real. Not once in my life. I suppose it should come as no surprise, seeing as I live in Oregon, of all places. I suppose maybe it was just a mistake, but just as the thought floated across my mind, I heard the siren. The siren of the squad car coming down the street. An officer talked through the speaker. "This is not a drill. Please enter your homes immediately. Do not go outside under any circumstances." Never the kind of guy to ignore higher authorities. I entered my house nervously, turned off all the lights on the above ground floors, and took my dog into the basement with a sleeping bag. Some food, my phone, a charger, some spare batteries, flashlight, and other essentials. I called my brother, who lives a couple of blocks away, and asked him if he had gotten the message. He had. I considered saying we should stay together to wait out the storm, but then I figured we'd probably get in trouble for that. So I hung up, got comfortable in my sleeping bag, and started browsing Reddit. Hey, that's what I'm doing. Eventually I fell asleep, seeing as I was under stress and had woken up pretty early. When I woke up, I realized that I still didn't hear any rain. Seriously, nothing at all. More confused than ever, I decided to see if the alert had been called off. I turned on my phone and called my brother again. It went straight to voicemail, though, so I gave up. I decided to risk it and go upstairs. I had to squeeze between the door and the wall to keep my dogs from following me upstairs, but I won and they stayed in the basement. I walked through my kitchen to the front door and looked out the window part of it. As I squinted to see outside in the dark, strange scene as it was only 2 p.m., judging by my clock, the TV flickered briefly. I looked around and at it, and it flickered again. But this time, every device on the ground floor flickered. Thinking little of it, I turned around and looked through the door again. Every house on the block had its lights turned off. Nobody was outside, except for one teenage girl. A thin, short-haired girl wearing what looked like a pillowcase walked unsteadily down the street, very slowly, looking as though she was having some difficulty. I turned around, now extremely confused and worried and got the dog's food bowls, which I had forgotten earlier. When I looked up, one of the houses, the one diagonally across from mine, right next to the house across the street and to the left, had its lights on and one of its windows broken. I shuddered and rushed back into the basement as the lights flickered intensely. I locked the door to the basement and sat on an old, tattered couch that I had brought down here. The basement is where I put everything I didn't have room for. So yeah, it's packed. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention something that may be worth noting. I live in a small town. A very small town. Probably with a population of under 500 or less. As a matter of fact, isn't even on most maps. We never make any news, we never have any scandals or anything. This is the first interesting thing that's happened, I think, since Mrs. Redacted lost her dentures to a raccoon. So it's possible this whole thing seems way worse than it is. Call me crazy, but a few minutes ago I was thoroughly enjoying myself. I love these scenarios and my basement is totally secure. So I'm having the time of my life. Well, I was. I decided to turn on my radio. What harm could it do? As long as I didn't turn the volume up too high. I was surprised to find that our local radio station was still up and running. They were talking about the weather, so I listened hard for any news that I hadn't heard. There wasn't any. They were just as confused as us. Not wanting to listen to crappy pop music indefinitely, I tuned into another station. This one was one I hadn't heard before. Could you give me the status of Redacted County? Over. No new developments. Over. Okay, any fatalities? Over. What part of no new developments do you not understand, McCullen? A squad car will be passing through soon to scan the area for the target. Over. Any ETA on that? Over. No, not yet. Over. And any word from HQ, Jones? Over. No, McClellan. Not yet. Not since 013 first got out. Over. Well, let me know if and when they contact you. Over. At that point, I lost the signal. Well, not really, but the connection got so weak that I could barely make out anything they were saying. I figured I must have found a police communication channel, and I'd been left with no answers whatsoever. That was about 45 minutes ago. As of me writing this now, guys, I don't know what's going on. Do any of you live near me? You'll know if you've received the warning. I'd say that what county I live in and which ones were affected, but I don't know too for privacy reasons. Anyway, I'll keep you guys updated, okay? Until then, wish me luck. Whoa. Um, whoa. So, that is some borderline SCP type stuff, and I love those kinds of stories. That is, whew, that was really cool. I worked security at Disney World. Well, I mean I did. I work in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I won't say where I work as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online. But I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years, I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally, there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While we're while the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive and stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I tried to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. And all of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next 2 days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family: dad, mom, two little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made that call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all the stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots, and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This was when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now, Disney has something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, fast pass, a system to use to bypass lines, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had a breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride. It's a small world around 11 a.m. Then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old coworker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they wrote it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad had, and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride, middle of the damn day, turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I've called the police and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras and a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts and are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album and I swear there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle, but the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around, so it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 to 15, I can see Dad getting angry, yelling. Mom was holding on to those 2 kids like their life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying. And it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out, and one, the dad is missing. Another, they're all gone. Maybe they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out, but in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and the kids. It's just when I look closely and I can see Dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just Mom and 1 kid, another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think them 2 are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And y'all, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures, I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with his family. I can't look anymore. I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security cameras that local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After all, I talked to the police. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to go to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get out of there. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are. That's absolutely nuts. This poor family is just going around and around and around. And there's nothing they can do. They've tried escaping and they just end up right back where they started. Well, that's all I have time for tonight. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and comment down below if you want to see more of this stuff. Also, don't forget to subscribe and ring that little bell, because I've been told there are rumors that if you ring the bell, you hear a sound like you've never heard before. It is absolutely breathtaking and mind-blowing to hear the sound the bell makes. But there is a process. You have to hit subscribe and then the bell. Can't skip it. Don't. You in particular, I saw you trying to hit the bell first and then subscribe. No. It's subscribe, then bell notification, so you're always kept up and aware of any other videos that I post in the future. So thanks again for watching, and have a spooky night. Good night.